guys hear me okay? Everyone on stage, everyone sitting? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here today. It's so nice to see your guys' faces, and I hope you're excited to hear about what we're going to talk about, which is careers in the publishing and book world. My name is Viv, and I'll be moderating the conversation today. And I'm especially excited to be here because my dad actually went to high school here in the 60s. Yeah, back when it was one school in this very big building called Seward Park High School. But a little bit about me. I am currently a grad student in sociology, but I am on this panel because for 3 years I was the coordinator of the World Voices Festival for International Literature at PEN America. And I've had about 4 years working in publishing and the literary sector, in public programming and literary events, in publishing, as a freelance writer, and I'm about to start as a bookseller for You and Me Books, which you'll hear about from Lucy in a bit. So I've kind of been around the literary publishing block a bit, and have done a lot of different types of work that have catered to my primary career interest, which is in storytelling. So that also includes like working in communications for a city council candidate. I recently was a production assistant on a dance performance, and these are just like the different ways I've pursued different types of storytelling. So maybe that can pique your interest in what you want to do if that is similar to your interests as well. And I imagine as high schoolers, you guys have started to think about what you want to do after school, where you want to go to college maybe. So I thought that this conversation would kind of have this two-pronged focus. The first being to kind of share just the different types of careers that you can have in publishing in the literary world around books, but also to show you guys that there are very different ways to get to those places. I think everyone on the stage has done different types of work, some of which has supported their literary and creative careers, some that's kind of just done alongside of it. So we'll just be talking a lot about like balancing the different types of work you can do while chasing dreams that are like steeped in creative work. So I hope you guys enjoy that conversation today. And without further ado, I'm gonna pass the mic down the line and just have all of you guys introduce yourselves, and then we'll get started after that.
Hi, my author name is C. Michelle Lindley, but you can call me Courtney. My debut fiction book novel is coming out in July. What other thing should I say? I should have prepared for a bio or something. Maybe that's it for now. Yeah,
that's good. I don't have much more to say other than that. My name is TRAN. I wrote a memoir that was published in 2021. About my life as a Vietnamese immigrant living here in New York City. I've been here for 31 years now. And yeah, I'm currently working on a novel next.
What's your memoir called?
Oh, it's called House of Sticks. Thanks, Lucy.
Hi guys, my name is Claire On. My debut novel is called I Guess I Live Here Now, and it's written for young adults, so you guys, and older. And it's about a girl that was born and raised in New York who, against her desires, is forced to move to her home country in Korea, and just sort of the cultural shift that she has to reconcile while in her so-called home country. I am working on my second novel right now called Bad Influence, about a teenager's desire to pursue social media fame. And that will be published, I think, in May of 2025. Yeah, that's about it from me.
Hi, my name is Julie Leung, and I do two jobs, actually. So by day, I work in book publishing at Penguin Random House, which is one of the larger publishers that exist. I mostly did marketing for many, many years, and then starting next Monday, I am switching paths to become a deputy publisher. So happy to talk about the inner workings of the publishing business. And then by night, I write children's books. I've been very lucky. I've published up to 7, I think, at this point, and I have another one coming out this May about the architect I.M. Pei, and I'm currently working on another one about Corky Lee, who is an Asian American photographer who took many, many photos in this neighborhood that we sit in right now. That's me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carol. Guess I could say my full name. I'm Carol Yu. And I am self-published, meaning that I created my own small business in order to publish books I wanted. So I self-publish bilingual children's books, so books that are in Chinese and then have like a alphabetized version of Chinese to help with pronunciation, and then also an English version. And I also work in education. I was a former teacher and also worked for an organization that ran schools abroad in East West Africa, and then currently work in an ed tech company in math tutoring.
Hi, y'all. My name is Lucy, also you, but not related to Carol. I own a bookstore called You and Me Books. It's the first female Asian American bookstore in New York City. And I professionally I've been a chemical engineer for many years. I was also a supply chain manager. I did many, many career pivots. I was a line cook as well. I call myself a career hobbyist, so I just jump around and do a bunch of different things all the time. I love literature. I love the world of literature. I had no experience before I entered literature, and I'm working on my first fiction novel at the moment.
Thank you, everyone, for those intros. I love the variety of career paths we have represented on this panel, and I'm just excited to dive in. So my first question for you guys is, I want you to close your eyes and think about who you were in high school, and think about at that time what you wanted to do career-wise, what you thought you were going to do, and then maybe reflect on what actually happened along the way. And anyone can take this, so happy to pass the mic to anyone.
Sorry to jump in here. I was very, very anxious in high school. I was really dealing with depression in high school. I did not know what I was going to do. I had a lot of probably unsaid pressure to go into a career that was really stable. So I thought I wanted to be a cardiothoracic surgeon because I watched a lot of Grey's Anatomy. And I went to college to go into surgery, to go as pre-med. And I totally realized that I hate blood, so I couldn't do that. And I was really terrified that every mistake I made in high school was gonna cause me to make a lot of mistakes in my life. And I ended up in a completely different life than I expected in high school. I was I'm so far from the life I was expecting of myself, and it ended up being actually a lot better. So, but I ended up changing majors to chemical engineering, not because I knew anything about chemical engineering, because it was the easiest transfer, and it ended up being the hardest major, and I hated it. And I did it for many years, but I think I realized at this point in my life that life really surprises you with what you want to do, and it's never too late to make a change.
I mean, I guess we could go down the line. Yeah, just to continue the theme of like, life is non-linear, it's full of surprises. I think I was very like naively focused on like college is the end. Like getting into college is like, that's just, it's like once you've done that, like life is accomplished. And that's really not it, because it's like a means to something else if that's what you choose to do. And there are also like non-college paths to like pursuing your dreams as well. And so I think, yeah, when I was in high school, that was like my short-sighted dream was like, oh, it's just college and that's it. But it's so untrue. Once I got to college, it was like exploring like so many other paths, because I actually ended up with, in high school graduating, like not knowing what I wanted to do. And so college for me was like this huge kind of journey of exploring lots of different like academic interests, extracurricular interests. And for me, I didn't graduate with like a singular career in mind to pursue. I just graduated with this newfound interest in social justice, this idea that like all lives are equal, no matter, what city you were born in or like what country you were born in. And then after that was just like this exploration after that of like, well, how do I pursue that one value that I've now developed? And so, yeah, that was my own sort of like surprising nonlinear path as well.
Ooh, so high school Julie was pretty bitter. Mostly bitter because I think I spent most of it at my parents' Chinese restaurant where I had to run the cash register because that's what happens when you're new immigrants. The entire family works in the Chinese restaurant. But my one saving grace was that I checked out a ton of books from the library. That was my main entertainment form factor. Didn't have a cell phone, didn't have, access to a laptop yet. And I immediately knew going into college that I wanted to study English and work in books. So I'm one of the few people that was very much never wavered on what I wanted to do because I loved books so much. But at the same time, it was a very fraught time in the Leung household in that I did not pick any stable, lucrative paths to my career. But jokes on my parents now. I work in book publishing. So I think, there's so many paths to ending up where you want to be. And I would say, even though I kind of knew I wanted to work in books, it was actually a very circuitous path to actually end up being here, like being an English major is, to be real, you have to get a little creative in networking about what you guys want to do with that degree afterwards. So happy to talk that further.
When I was a kid and in high school, my number one goal was to own the largest candy factory in the world. And I think as I got older, that dream felt a little out of reach and a little unrealistic. I wasn't very good at science, which you have to know if you're going to make or create edible things. And I am not a Nepo baby, so like, where am I gonna get the money to build a frickin' factory in New York City, So I gave that up, and I went into communications at NYU because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet, but I figured that sort of covers the ground for any basic job. But I think my biggest learning was, as you get older, the dreams that you want, you have to really fight to hold on to them. And I think, like, I knew I always loved writing, and it was not a career option that I thought I could have because I also come from an immigrant family background, and you need to make a living to able to pay your rent and whatever. But it was hard to hold on to it. But when you continue to work from job to job, you begin to learn your values. And I think the value that I learned was that I don't want to be stuck in a corporation. And I sort of figured out jobs to get me to a point where I wasn't living that typical corporate life, the 9 to 6, or depending on how grueling your job is, the 8 to 8. So my advice would be to pick the lifestyle that you want and to find jobs to sort of fit into that lifestyle, because I don't think that your job is your whole life, and that's only one aspect of who we are as people.
These are such great answers, so inspiring. Okay, high school Lee. The future was looking pretty bleak for me in high school. Like Lucy, I have a background in science. I attended the Bronx High School of Science, and I was the captain of my high school's robotics team. I was also failing almost every single class. So not looking good for me then. Like Julie, I worked as a nail salon technician, so with my mother, as a child of immigrants, as and as an immigrant myself. So not doing so well in school, I thought that the only path forward for me was to become a nail salon technician. And I was devastated because I felt within me that I had more potential, that I could be, something maybe not science related, but maybe having to do with words, because that was the one class that I could somewhat do well in. And I somehow passed my classes, barely, and I made it to college, and I majored in neuroscience because I thought that that's what I was supposed to do. It would be a lucrative field. But I eventually ended up dropping out because I was really depressed. There was all this pressure, the kind of pressure that Lucy was talking about. Pressure to just go down this path that is carved out for us. You go to high school, you go to college, so on and so forth. I didn't realize that there was another path waiting for me. And so making the decision to drop out of college, while unorthodox, it was the best decision that I ever made in my life, because that's when I discovered the love of words. I discovered literature, and that I could potentially have a career in writing. Yeah, I think the theme here is that life is not this linear thing, and it's very unpredictable. And my advice is to just lean into the surprises that life has in store for you.
Yeah, in high school, I was very, very shy, very introverted. I appreciate this question. I actually haven't made this connection yet, but I have a memory of going into a museum and learning that it was someone's job to choose the paintings and the sculptures on the wall, and thinking to myself, oh, that's what I want to do. 18 or how old am I? I keep forgetting. Whatever many years later. I think I overestimated that. Whatever, it doesn't matter. However many years later, it turned out I wrote a novel about a curator, so that found its way back around. But initially I went to college for art, and then I changed it to English, because I realized you had to get a PhD if you wanted to be a curator, and I thought, well, that is a long time from now. And then I worked in marketing and graphic design and had odd jobs here and there, and then eventually found my way to writing short stories, which led into getting an MFA and then writing a novel. So I took that kind of path, and yeah, that's about it, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. These are definitely super inspiring answers, and I think a lot of what you guys said resonates with me a lot. I think growing up, I wanted to be a hairstylist. I would love to braid my American Girl doll's hair. And then watching Grey's Anatomy, I also had a moment where I was like, oh, maybe I could just be a surgeon. I just have to pick being a doctor, right? That's how it works. But I was really bad at the sciences in school. I really liked to write. So as I got closer and closer to graduating high school, I thought maybe I should go to journalism school. And I did that for a year. I went to USC and did journalism school for a year, but really hated the school out there. I grew up on the Lower East Side, just blocks away from here, so it was a really big culture shock for me. And I ended up transferring back to the East Coast and went to liberal arts school at Wesleyan, where I studied American Studies and English, which I always joke to people now is not even concentrating in anything. But I think that's what I need to do, because I had a lot of interests and still do. And after graduating from college, I applied to a bunch of editorial fellowships, thinking I would still go down the journalism path. But ended up getting this job at PEN America, which is a free expression advocacy organization that also produces literary events and a literary festival every year, and just ended up working there for 3 years into the pandemic. And that was a great job for me because I loved working with writers, but also I really appreciated the advocacy side of the organization. So it kind of catered to my interests a lot. But then after that, I was kind of seeking out something new again. I decided to go to school for sociology, which is what I'm doing now. And I think that just speaks to what a lot of people on the panel have just been referencing, that it's never too late to pivot and just to do what you love to do, and that is always fluid as well. That changes, and life is surprising. But yeah, okay, my second question is, what do you think is the biggest misconception fed to young people about career and work?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception is we're fed this idea that there's just this one path to the summit, of success. And I think that's what ends up really destroying our self-esteem, especially when we struggle, when we fail. And so I think, I really wish when I was younger that there was a course that teaches us how to deal with failure, because failure isn't a dead end. It's simply a stepping stone on the way to success. And we're not really taught that. We're taught that, okay, if you don't do well in this stage of life, then that's it. You have no other prospects for you. And as you can see with everyone on this panel, we've all struggled. We've had our ups and downs, but I think the key to moving forward is just believing that there are many paths to the same summit.
Yeah, jumping off of that, I think also the idea that you have to have it figured out now or very soon, even just the pressure to choose your major if you go to college. I think you have to, especially in the arts community, I feel, we as a culture, we love the wonderkin and we love the young person who comes out with the genius art, right? Very young. But I do think that there's a lot of value in living first and alongside a career and being open to changes and realizing that you don't have to figure it out right away.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions, at least that I learned along the way, is that hard work is enough. Like, yes, you have to work hard, but so much of career and like jobs that come along your way is also just luck and timing. And the only way that you can make yourself luckier is by meeting a bunch of people and also by not being a jerk. Like, your reputation will precede you. Like, the more people are like, this is a really nice person, the more they're gonna wanna help you. And none of us got to where we are on our own. Like, the village thing is true. It's like this person helping you along the way, like, and your friends and all that stuff. It doesn't happen like you on your own just through hard work. So be a nice person. You never know who's gonna help you out. And I think the other thing that is like more of a misconception these days, just with like, TikTok, social media, I think we all like this overnight success story, because it's such a good story. Like, who doesn't want to hear about like the flight attendant who was like writing stories on her napkins? True story, by the way. And now she's like this best-selling author, like selling rights to like Hollywood and stuff. Everyone loves that kind of story. But there's also Min Jin Lee, who wrote a book for like 30 years. And so I think like that's like the opposite of what I just said, which is not everything happens like overnight. And a lot of things also do come from years and years and years of like hard work and patience.
I can add on. Go ahead.
You also don't have to do everything that you're good at. I think that was something that was really hard for me when I was young. Every teacher told me, you should do this as a career. Like, you're really good at this. And like, you can be good at a lot of things. And I was good at a lot of things. And I thought that I had to do those things, but you can choose for yourself. You don't have to, yeah. If you're good at engineering, you don't have to be an engineer full time.
I wanted to underline a little bit of what you said about your opportunities come from people, not a path. How I got into book publishing was actually entirely by happenstance, in the sense that I was actually ignoring what I was supposed to be doing to talk to someone else, and that person happened to work at a book publisher, and I went on a limb and invited her out for coffee, and she was able to get my resume on a hiring manager's desk physically. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't make a choice to, again, ignore the path that I was supposed to be on in order to take a chance, in order to get in front of someone else that could offer me an opportunity. So I think people over things, people over paths, knowing your network, who's on your side, who you're willing to cultivate in a relationship with. Those are probably more important than just following and checking off boxes on a resume.
Such good advices, plural. I guess mine would be whatever you guys choose to study, right? I'm sure I'm not alone in that we all have so many interests, right? Like, there's not many people out there who will be like, I'm only interested in human anatomy. Like, most of us have varying levels of interest in varying subjects. Pick the thing that you're interested in and be invested in it and be open to other things. I think sometimes what Carol was saying, like, we want results immediately, and more often than not, that's not really going to happen. And so just put the work and the time into it, and you can still be open to other opportunities, but you also have to give what you choose a fair shot, and expect eventually that something will come of it. If you're passionate and you're working hard for a certain goal. And I think on top of that, it's very similar to what Carol was saying, was be a kind person. When you're studying these things, when you meet people, you're going to meet so many people, and you will have so many opportunities to put other people beneath you or to use people. Don't do that. And don't do any of that, because honestly, it's just going to come back and hurt you. And there's absolutely nothing to be gained from something like that. And for me personally, like, I'm new to this industry. I've only been a writer for 3 years now, 2-3 years. And that feels like a very early part of my career. And something I like to do with myself is to do check-ins. Like, what are my values? Let's remind myself, like, what my values are, what I care about, and the people that I care about. And look at the person and not their resume or their cover letter or what they have to offer you. Because honestly, those things are very fleeting, but a character in somebody, that's the type of stuff you want to surround yourself with to build a rich life. Oh, I don't know why I'm giving you that. I can hold it.
Thanks, everyone. So you all have either done or are currently doing work in addition to your book-related or creative jobs. What is the relationship between that work and your book literary work?
I think everything is related. Creatively, I mean, I've done so many, hello. I've done so many jobs and I've done so many different careers, and I've learned something from everything. Literally nothing is ever wasted. I use my engineering career in creating a bookstore every day. I almost went to art school. I use that art design every single day in my marketing skills for my business. I write because I read a lot. I was a line cook, so I know structure, I know timing and efficiency. All of these things. I was a runner, so I'm nimble with my body, so I can be handy and build shelves. Like, everything that I learned has been used. So I think that literature and reading creates worlds that are similar to the worlds that we live in, or an expansion of them. And they cannot be created unless we're invested in the lives and the worlds that we live in. So I'm ready for whatever journey comes. I'm always saying yes to everything, probably a little bit too much, to the point where I'm working a little bit too much. So I think we can all relate to that. But I always see something as an opportunity to learn, and learning does not stop when school stops.
I got a quick add-on. I'm going to do a quick commercial for book publishing. And for book publishing, a lot of times what comes to mind is an editor, a writer, someone who is touching the words themselves. But I'm also here, there is actually a lot of different jobs in books. If you love books, you love reading, it's also a business. It's also a place where design matters a lot. Cover art matters a lot. People who work in, production management, you talk about line cooks, someone who's able to get things to the printer on time. There's also those who manage the business, the finances. So I think when it comes to, if you decide that this might be a field that I'm interested in. It's not necessarily there's one path of being an editor or being a writer. There's also so many ways to enrich this business of making books happen that it's definitely worthwhile. I personally worked in the marketing and publicity department, and you can be every bit as creative as an editor or writer in that space. You're taking someone's art, someone's world, and essentially coming up with a way to reach a reader. And that to me has been super exciting. So that's just a PSA for other lines that are within the literary realm, but not necessarily in the same, like the linear path of like, oh, I'll just work with words. That's all.
Yeah, so I guess in your day-night analogy, which reminds me of Batman. In the daytime, I work in education. So in that sense, I feel like, I think a lot about like the academic development of kids. But once I started getting into stories for kids, it really, and also I'm a parent of two, so I think it really like tapped into something which I knew in my head but hadn't quite grasped like in my heart, which is just like, yeah, there's so much more to school and being a kid than like just knowing stuff. It's like, and I think stories really get at that, which is just like, who are the companions that, go through your highs and lows of each day with you? What are the memories that you're making? I don't know, how do you deal with stuff when you're getting like mad or sad, or how do you celebrate things? And I think that's, such an important part of just being a young person. So I think that's like really helped complement just my thinking on, just education overall. It's not just what you know, it's all this other stuff as well.
God, I'm sorry. I was like, I have nothing valuable to add.
I just want to echo something that Lucy said earlier about learning, the learning that happens after you get out of school, after school stops. And so what I do in the daytime is I'm a tutor for students your age, middle school, high school, college. And I find that it's been incredibly instrumental in helping me make sense of my own struggles when I was your age. And working with my students, I realized that a lot of these students are really hard on themselves, and they get these messages from the world, from their parents, from society, that they have to succeed at all costs. And so a refrain that often happens, that I often repeat during my sessions is be kind to yourself. If you get a bad score on a test, be kind to yourself. Learn from your mistakes. And as I was telling my students this, I realized I wasn't very kind to myself, and sometimes I'm still not kind to myself. So the kind of work that I do is really helpful for me. I feel like I'm learning so much from my students as well. It also allows me, sometimes when I'm hitting a creative block, I get to do math. And so, I'm working both sides of my brain, which is really great. So, yeah, I feel like I had another point, but I totally forgot, so sorry.
Thank you for that. So I think because we're talking about creative careers, especially careers in publishing, we kind of have to get to the real talk about the economic situation that and the struggles that come along with that. I mean, of course, working in publishing and being a writer is notoriously an underpaid gig, and I was wondering if you guys could share any experiences working through that and how to balance making a living and pursuing a creative path.
No.
The U's are very
I don't want to hog the perspective, but yes, getting as a publishing assistant, the pay was dirt, and a lot of it is supplemental income that you can do for freelance editing, or as I did work for hire writing. So maybe I'm speaking more to my parents than to speaking to this crowd, but a career in the arts can be stable, but you have to be a little creative about it, a little strategic about if this is the thing that is important to me and I want to be in, here are the ways that I can piecemeal my livelihood together for me to be satisfied, happy, and, kind to yourself as well. But I think, what ended up being kind of a hard thing, like I was essentially like ghostwriting books, but it ended up being a space for me to be creative. And so now I am able to pursue a dual path in publishing, both as a creator. After I did a number of work for hire projects, I was able to get a literary agent out of it. And then, but still maintaining, steadily going in my publishing job. And then my big recommendation for publishing jobs is companies don't owe you anything in this day and age. Feel free to jump around. You don't owe your loyalties to your college or your company that you work for. And oftentimes, the best way to move up is to move to a different place and discover something new about yourself. It can be scary, but I recommend it.
And then we can go, if you're going to go from like everything is creative, but if you're going to go from something more traditional, like to something creative, Ava, how do you say her last name? DuVernay? She said something once in an interview that really stuck with me, which is like, you don't have to immediately quit what you're doing. And, some people do that and that's the right path for them. But also, some people feel a lot of pressure from that if you decide to quit everything and then like put 100% of like all your time, money, effort into like the creative dream that you're pursuing. And so one thing that I've heard her say just as advice is like, test it out first on the side. Like then it doesn't put so much pressure on your dream to succeed immediately. So that's like one just piece of advice that stuck with me. Another thing that I just wanted to share is super boring, but I feel like it's really important, which is like, I think just 101, like good old budgeting, like really helps. Just knowing like, it's like the really simple and like, it sounds easy to do, but just like don't spend more than what you don't have, like all that stuff. It's just easy to not do that sometimes. So just know how to make a simple budget, know how to do that for yourself, for whatever you're building, for your dream and what you're investing in it. Because like if you want to become a singer, voice lessons cost money, making a track costs money, like making art sometimes costs money. And so it's boring, but it's going to really help you, not have to live in a car if you don't have to.
Carol pretty much said exactly what I wanted to say. I never quit any jobs before starting a passion. So I was still working as an engineer full time, and I took a night job as a line cook. When I started the bookstore, I was still working as a supply chain manager full time. So I worked from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. I worked at the store 11 to 7, 7 days a week, and then I worked from 8 p.m. to midnight. So I was really committed to my passions, and I had to work really hard. So working hard is absolutely part of it. I also, through my many career shifts, I took a 60% pay cut to do what I do now. And that took a lot of planning. That took a lot of budgeting. I never wanted to go in the negative, and I never went in the negative because of that budgeting. So anytime I made a career shift, I kept at least 1 year variance for potential, for me to try things out and maybe fail, and knowing that I had enough cushion to do that. And I never took that step without having that. I also, very, very, very boring from a budgeting perspective. Every paycheck I had, I put 30% of it away immediately. I never spent it, and I pretended like I didn't have it. So that's how I started my business, and that's the only way I would have started my business 5 years out of college.
Practical visionaries on the stage. Does anyone have anything to add to that before moving to the next question?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Lucy said. For me, I think there are many forms of wealth, and it's incredibly important to have stability, financial stability in your life. So like Carol was saying, definitely save, delayed gratification, all of that. But sometimes in the pursuit of monetary wealth, we often lose sight of what's truly important to us. And so my advice to you is to really figure out what your passions are and then work towards that, and work towards building a life that is truly fulfilling. And then I believe that all the other forms of wealth will eventually come if you do all the budgeting and all the legwork, due diligence.
On a practical level, I didn't even know that these existed until just a few years ago before I applied to them, but there are master's programs and PhD programs that are funded that will at least give you a couple years, for PhD, 5, 6, up to that, for writing and other creative endeavors. There are also grants available to apply to. All of these are really, really competitive, but if you do your research, there are options like that out there as well.
And I think this might be our last question before we move on to Q&A, but I noticed that we're all women on the stage, and a lot of your guys' work seeks to center or uplift lesser heard voices, especially stories pertaining to women, and for a lot of you, Asian women. And I was just wondering why that was important to you.
We're going to start on this side this time. So when I was younger, I was a very avid reader, and I sought representations of myself through all the books that I read in vain, because there weren't a lot of stories about Asian American females. And so I felt very lonely in my life. It wasn't until the 9th grade when I read a book by Toni Morrison called The Bluest Eye. And there was something about Pecola Breedlove, the main character in the book, that made me feel so seen. And I remember it was the first book to make me cry, and I thought, oh my goodness, if I make it out of my circumstances alive and intact, I would love to write a book about my own life one day, so that other people my age then, other little girls in the world, would feel seen and not alone.
And you did. She did. She did. She did it. She did it. Okay, well, I have the mic. I'm sorry if we sound like ancient people, just like throwing advice in this 1 hour, just screaming advice at you guys for the next 10 years. Maybe this is how we felt from our parents. What was the question?
It was Asian woman.
Oh, right, the Asian woman thing. So I think that I feel like unintentionally, a lot of us are still doing unlearning of years and years of women pitted against women narratives. And I notice it. It's not if anyone ever asks me or anyone I know, oh, do you not think that she can succeed if you succeed? The answer will be no. We don't actively think it. But the way that society has set it up for us in a very white male-dominated world, it can feel that way, right? My friend has talked about her one other Asian associate got promoted, so she thinks she won't get promoted. And I'm like, that's a load of crap. And it's this deeply ingrained narrative that there's only room for 2 of us or 3 of us, and therefore we unintentionally maybe start competing against each other when that's not the way that it should be. And so I think for me personally, I found it really important to lift up other BIPOC voices and BIPOC sisters, because with every act that we continue to fight against this ingrained narrative, the more that it'll sort of shed itself right out of our subconscious. So that's the main thing for me. And additionally, when I became a debut author, there were so many people who were supportive of me, and they didn't even know me, and they didn't know who I was. And this is, I think, where the whole kindness thread comes in, where if you're just a good person and you're trying to support your fellow sisters, it'll help you, right? And that help will come back to you. And it's so important that we live in this world of compassion and supporting each other, and not in a competitive world where we think that there's not enough room for us, because that's just not true. And that's like something that even as adults we're still unlearning, and people in the publishing industry, I'll talk to them and they will share their same sentiments. Like, I'm still unlearning this idea that there's not enough room for BIPOC authors or BIPOC creatives. And it's so not true. There is more than enough room. And it's an industry that's been dominated by white male authors for a long time, and there was always more than enough room for all of them, and we don't even come close to that percentage. So even if it feels saturated, and even if some years there seems to be more, POC authors, like, it's never going to even compare to what has been. So just remember that.
I would also say a lot of that, the art that exists is because the people who curate and gatekeep the art are also of a certain background, which is why it's very important to me, why I was so pushy about people exploring careers in book publishing, because we need more people of marginalized communities in the seats making decisions about what is art, what are books. And when the book comes out, what should the cover be? What should the copy say in a way that is authentic and speaks to the truth of the artist? And I already forgot the original question, but I think that's kind of my closing argument here is I'm always trying to be, to kind of talk about the fact that art is also a business, is also numbers, and in order for us to be that change, in order for us to affect culture, we just need more of us at that table. That's all. Closing argument.
Yeah, I mean, I started writing my books mainly because I just didn't see enough kids' books in Chinese that were the types of stories I'd want to read. So that's how I got started. But as a reader, I just wanted to share, because I've read like Lee's book, I've read Claire's book. I mean, every time, even though, I'm like, oh, wow, there's an author, there's a book on the shelf like that of someone who looks like me, that in itself like means so much. But also after reading their stories, you're just like, you feel like your heart is like a little bit bigger from knowing someone else's journey, that some parts of it you really resonate with, and other parts you're like, I had no idea what it was like to work at a nail salon. So I just think that that's just so important in just being a human, just understanding someone else's like walk of life, that some parts of it looks like yours and others, other parts don't.
I think just at this point in my life, I've had a twofold perspective. Owning a bookstore that focuses on immigrant stories, writers of color, I've felt it's extremely important for us as individuals to write our own stories. You might be afraid to be like, hey, there's already a story out there that exists, but it's never existed in your own words, and that's extremely important. On the other side, the world has to be bigger than our immediate world. When we talk about collective resistance, we have to think about it in terms of, okay, let's say the Asian American experience. That does not happen in silo from the Latinx experience, from the Black experience, from the Indigenous experience. So when we're talking about writing and talking about literature, and specifically the Asian American experience, for me, that includes all the other experiences. We have to fight on behalf of all of it, because that's how we really see real change, if we fight as a collective, and that means freedom for all of us. So, yeah.
Any closing thoughts? Is that everything? Well, I want to thank you guys for sharing your insights. I feel like I learned a lot about, maybe I'll like start a new career after this panel. But thank you guys all for coming. And if you guys have any questions, I know time is kind of up, but you're welcome to come up and ask us anything. Thank you.
I was gonna ask, was like the process of like writing a book for you guys? Like, what's your personal experience with the process?
Is this off? Hi. It was so hard. I was like, first of all, it took me 7 years to write my book, and most of those years were spent in a corner of my bedroom pulling my hair out and in tears. So it was really, really painful, but ultimately very rewarding. I feel like I learned so much about myself through the process of writing about my life, and I came away with it with a lot of compassion, both for myself and everyone that I was in contact with. So, yeah.
I think it was a lot less glamorous than people make it out to be. I think that you imagine a retreat in a beautiful cabin surrounded by trees, and you're like in isolation, and then the muse hits you, and then voila, like a novel is formed. And that's what I thought it would be. It absolutely was not that. It was a lot of Excel sheets and outlines and Post-it notes. And a lot of methodical planning. And yes, room for creativity is absolutely vital, and to give room for your characters to take form and take charge of their own story is important. But yeah, it was a lot of planning, a lot of moving things around, like any project that you would be managing.
Yeah, thank you.